People who don't like Superman love to argue that the reason they don't like Superman is because he's too pure, too good, too much of a Boy Scout. Maybe those one-dimensional cartoon characters were enough in the 1940s and 50s when the target audience was children, but we modern comics readers are sophisticated adults, and we demand more nuanced, imperfect heroes. They say, and have said since I was a kid, and seeing as how I'm now fully grown and dangling precariously on the precipice of middle age, they've been saying it for a long time. Now, here's the thing. If you don't like Superman, you cannot like him for whatever reason you want. You don't have to make an argument for it if you don't want to. It's a matter of taste. If Superman's not your thing, Superman's not your thing. Go ahead and live in a world without joy and sunshine. Best of luck to you. But for as long as some people who don't like Superman have chosen, for whatever reason, to defend their preference with this argument, there have also been Superman fans, and more to the point, Superman writers and artists making a counter-argument. I know of no more effective or skillfully presented rebuttal to the Superman's too much of a goody two-shoes position than the story presented in Action Comics number 775, the March 2001 issue, written by Joe Kelly, penciled by Doug Mankey and Lee Bermejo, and inked by half the inkers employed by DC Comics at the time, Tom Gwen, Dexter Vines, Jim Royal, Jose Marzan, Wade Von Grawbadger, and Wayne Foucher. The title of the story, What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way? Superman squares off against a new team of superpowered vigilantes, the Elite, whose brutal methods threaten not only his life and his status as the world's foremost hero, but the values he represents and fights for. Superman doesn't actually cross paths with the Elite until a bit later in the story. First, he arrives at the aftermath of one of their, let's call them interventions. A terrorist group has launched an attack on Tripoli using a gigantic ape with weapons grafted to its body. Aren't comics neat? Before Superman could get there, the Elite show up and take out the giant ape and the terrorists. Nice piece of work. Except for the facts that the giant ape crushes a bunch of buildings when it falls, destroying a significant portion of the city, and that when the Elite take out the terrorists, they also kill a bunch of soldiers who had deployed to defend against the terrorists. But hey, omelets, broken eggs, etc. Superman and the rest of the gang at the Daily Planet are appalled by the Elite's recklessness and callous disregard for life and property. But the general public seems to have taken a liking to the Elite. During a briefing at the White House, President Lex Luthor, remember that? When Lex Luthor was the president? When DC Comics had the American people elect a corrupt, criminal, self-interested, egomaniacal businessman to lead the government? What was I saying? Oh yeah, President Lex gets a briefing on the Elite in the White House. And once he realizes that the Elite are powerful enough to actually defeat Superman, if they were to ever actually do battle, he decides to just let it ride. As long as the Elite continue operating outside United States territory, Lex's attitude is, let them fight. Superman, on the other hand, is deeply disturbed by the Elite, by their methods and by their growing popularity. He's working in the Fortress of Solitude alongside Steel, and he asks, do you think the world has moved on? But there's no time for an answer. A team of supervillains is attacking downtown Tokyo. Superman races to the scene, but when he gets close, something happens to him. He loses control, seems to catch fire, and plummets helplessly to the ground. As he struggles to his feet, still groggy, Superman finds himself surrounded by the villains. Then he watches in confusion and horror as the villains are literally dismantled by unseen attackers. Then the attackers show themselves. The Elite. After teleporting Superman along with them to their headquarters in a spaceship made from a sentient alien bacteria colony they abducted from a parallel universe, aren't comics neat? The Elite attempt to explain themselves. There are 4 of them. Coldcast, whose powers allow him to manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum. It was him who brought Superman down in Tokyo. Menagerie, who is bonded with a collection of alien parasites, which she can manipulate and deploy in various methods of attack. The Hat, whose powers are magical in nature, and the leader of the team, Manchester Black, a powerful telekinetic who tells Superman that Superman's way of doing things doesn't cut it anymore. The members of the elite, Black says, are all people who have suffered, who know firsthand how painful and difficult life can be, who understand that morality is not black and white, and that evil people exist and need to be stopped by any means necessary. Superman acknowledges some of what Black says, but insists that just because life is tough and things get complicated sometimes, that's no excuse for tossing morality in the garbage. Superman demands that the elite stop what they're doing immediately. Black responds by teleporting Supes back to Earth. He materializes mid-sentence in the middle of a used car lot. Supes has a heart-to-heart with his dad in Smallville, takes a flight around Metropolis where he overhears people of all ages and backgrounds talking about why they prefer the elite. Then he defeats a trio of hostile aliens and their human accomplices without killing anyone. The elite shows up, and Superman's like, "See how I stopped the bad guys without doing a murder? Now all I have to do is call in my pals in the Justice League to detain them, and since they're still alive, we can even question them and find out more about where they come from, what they want, if they know anything about any future threats. Do you get how this is supposed to work?" But Manchester Black isn't impressed. He tells Superman, "These are bad men. And what happens to them now? They stand trial, get sent to a prison that's actually a secret training facility where they'll teach government agents how to do what they do? You haven't accomplished anything. You've just fed the problem." Black thinks he knows how to solve the problem, though. He orders the Hat to kill the bad guys. And kill their families, too, just to send a message. Superman angrily smacks the Hat before any of that can happen. Black calls that just cause, and tells Superman if he's not part of the solution, he's part of the problem. "Tomorrow," Black says before the elite teleports away. The next day, they meet for their showdown. Wanting to minimize the threat to civilians, Superman requests that they relocate to a less populated area, so they teleport to the Jovian moon Io. That'll do for less populated, I think. The fight, which is broadcast to Earth through an array of drone cameras operated by the elite, doesn't go well for Supes at first. As the members of the elite take turns attacking, Manchester Black explains to Superman what's happening and what's going to happen next. "The people don't want babysitters in spandex," Black says. "They want surgeons to cut the ugly bits from them." Black tells Superman that when his superhero friends show up to avenge him, they'll get it even worse. After torturing Superman by telekinetically bringing him to the point of a stroke, Black turns him over to Coldcast, who unleashes a blast of electromagnetic energy that seems to obliterate Superman, all but the shredded scrap of his cape. Superman is no more. The elite are victorious. They stand around gloating for a second, but then Menagerie feels something like an insect bite her neck and realizes a moment later that she's been poisoned. A poison that causes the alien creatures she's bonded with to abandon her. A powerful wind picks up, creating a vacuum that causes the Hat to pass out. Coldcast, whose electromagnetic powers are temporarily depleted after unloading on Superman, is whisked away at hypersonic speed. Only Manchester Black remains. Manchester Black and Superman, who survived the assault by the elite and has now apparently killed all of them but their furious leader. Black prepares to end Superman once and for all, and a moment later Superman's eyes flash red, and Black finds himself inexplicably robbed of his powers. "I used my X-ray vision to look into your brain and search for abnormalities," Superman tells him. "I found one and cut it out by focusing my heat vision through your retina. Instant lobotomy." Black is shocked, appalled. "You're Superman," he tearfully insists. "You don't do this." He turns to the array of drone cameras and says, "Everyone on Earth saw what you did. They know that there's nothing special about you, that you're no better than us." Superman agrees. "Yes, they saw," he says. "They saw how ugly it is to do things your way, to cross the lines you cross. It probably frightened them, like it frightened me. I was afraid it would be hard, but you know what? It wasn't hard at all, because anger and hatred and vengeance and spite, those things are easy." Then Superman tells Black that there's good news. Superman didn't actually kill the rest of the elite. He only made it look like he did to prove a point. Coldcast, Menagerie, and the Hat are all nearby, temporarily incapacitated, but alive. Superman didn't even actually lobotomize Manchester Black, just used his heat vision to give Black a minor concussion that disabled his telekinetic abilities. His powers will come back, but not before he's been taken into custody by the proper authorities and given psi-dampening drugs to keep him from causing any more trouble. Black tells Superman he should have just killed them all, because now he's bought himself an enemy for life. As long as a heart beats in my chest, I'll come after you, Black declares. If you think this is over, you're living in a dream world. But Superman doesn't think that sounds so bad. Dreams save us, he tells Black. They lift us up and transform us. And until my dream of a better, more just and honorable and dignified world comes true, I'll never stop fighting. Ever. I don't want to shortchange the artwork by Mankey, Bermejo, and the inkers Wen, Vines, Royal, Marzan, Grawbadger, and Foucher. It's excellent. Detailed, gritty, expressive. This rendering of Superman after defeating most of the elite on Io is particularly impressive. He looks like a battered and extremely pissed off Rocky Balboa. But most of the qualities that make What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way not just a good story, but a genuine classic, are due to Joe Kelly's writing. Like I said at the beginning, Superman has been followed for decades by this criticism that he's too pure, too soft, and too simplistic for more sophisticated and cynical modern audiences. This criticism became especially prominent in the 1990s when Superman took a commercial and cultural backseat to darker, more morally ambiguous, and frequently more violent characters like Spawn, Venom, Lobo, as well as grittier reinterpretations of classic characters like Batman and Daredevil. Meanwhile, Superman's comics in the 90s were dominated by high-profile marketing gimmicks like his death and return, his transformation into a being with energy-based powers who eventually split into two beings, Superman Blue and Superman Red, and his long-awaited marriage to Lois Lane. Lots of comics fans and creators began to ask if Superman even had a place in this modern era of grim, self-serious, deconstructed anti-heroes, and understandably so. The brilliant trick Kelly pulls off in Action Comics 775 is to pose that question to us in the audience and also to the characters in the story, and to demonstrate that the answer to both questions is an unequivocal yes. By introducing the Elite, who are suspiciously similar to the Authority, a team of anti-heroes published by DC's Wildstorm imprint beginning in 1999, Kelly pulls those real-world arguments about Superman's relevance in the modern era into the story world. Here is a group of superhumans who do things the way many of the most popular comics characters of the late 20th and early 21st century do them. They don't fret collateral damage. They don't think twice about killing. They abide by no code other than might makes right. Or, as Manchester Black puts it to Superman during their showdown on Io, he who has the power makes the rules. Kelly is smart enough not to leave it at that. However, he doesn't take it for granted that the problems with the Elite and the fact that Superman is in the right will be self-evident to everyone in the audience. He shows us why the Elite and their methods and what they represent are dangerous, but he also shows us why they and their way of doing things appeals to some people. When Superman and Steel are in the fortress, we see the manifesto broadcast by the Elite, announcing their arrival and their intentions to the world. "We do not believe in nations," it reads. "We do not believe in treaties or boundaries or classes or politics." Okay. I can see why some folks might be attracted to that. It's egalitarian in a radical sort of way. "There are the good guys, namely us," the manifesto continues, "and there are the bad guys, namely anyone who treats anyone else like trash to further their own petty aims." Sounds a bit, absolutist, but at least they're looking out for us, right? "You asked for us, world. Now you got us. Be good, or we'll blow your house with a 50-megaton clod-seeding cluster bomb. Love us." So as long as you don't make trouble, you've got nothing to fear. Sounds like a good deal to me. All kidding aside, much of what Manchester Black says in an attempt to justify the elite's violent and unforgiving approach has a ring of truth. When Superman argues that instead of killing supervillains, they should be allowed to stand trial and incarcerated for their crimes, Black answers back that supervillains who are sent to prison usually find themselves involved in secret government projects that only give them more opportunities to wreak havoc on the world. That sounds cynical and conspiratorial, but the more you know about the fictional world of DC Comics, the less like that it sounds. One of the people we see in the briefing with President Luthor near the start of the story is Amanda Waller, who is the head of Task Force X, also known as the Suicide Squad, which is exactly the sort of unsavory government project Black is talking about. On the surface, at least, he does kind of have a point. Kelly goes further still and gives us specific reasons for people being supportive of this sort of brutal, unforgiving, extrajudicial justice. When Superman does his flyby of the city and hears various citizens talking about the elite, the things they say aren't exactly thoughtful or humane or compassionate, but they do make sense in a visceral sort of way. Construction workers express their appreciation for the elite destroying a Russian nuclear missile base, disarming our enemies, making America safer. What's wrong with that? Two women, one of whom apparently owned a dog who was eaten by the Joker. Aren't comics neat? Agree that, unlike Superman, who restrains himself according to the law, the elite would have given the Joker what he deserved. A group of teenagers express a similar sentiment. Do serial killers, like Gotham's Mr. Zsasz, or literature and cinema's Hannibal Lecter, really deserve protections like due process? Even a group of children playing dress-up as Superman and the elite manage to make what sounds like a good point about Superman's effectiveness. If he's fighting people just as powerful as he is, or more powerful even, and they're willing to kill, and Superman isn't, how is Superman supposed to stop them? During their talk in Smallville, Pa Kent explains it to his son in more general terms. People are angry. People are scared. They see the government not living up to its responsibilities. They see threats coming at them from all sides. And they want easy answers and quick results. Pa says, sometimes truth, justice, and the American way doesn't make them feel better. Kelly lets us see that the elite are in the wrong, not just because they're opposed to Superman, but because they're vicious and ruthless and sworn to uphold no principles other than might makes right and the ends justify the means. And while letting us see that, Kelly also shows us why, despite all that, some people still consider them the good guys and think their way is better than Superman's. Then, finally, Kelly forces Superman to prove himself, to show why his way is not only the right way morally speaking, but is fit to meet the challenges the world faces. The elite attacks him with brute force and a willingness to do whatever is necessary to win. Superman fights back using his wits, deploying his strength and speed strategically, not in an all-out frontal assault. And he uses the elite's preconceptions about him as weapons, doing things or appearing to do things they would have never expected him to do. In the end, he wins. He's perhaps come closer to crossing his uncrossable lines than he ever has, but he hasn't crossed them. He's done what he told Manchester Black should be done, defeated his enemies, and brought them to justice, alive. All of that is just how Kelly addresses questions of Superman's relevance within the fiction. He answers those same questions, or similar ones anyway, from an external perspective as well. Superman's too boring. Superman's too simplistic. Superman's too hard to write in a way that modern audiences will find interesting. I've long regarded these not so much as statements, but as confessions on the parts of the people making them. Throughout What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way, Joe Kelly shows them and the rest of us how it's done. You think Superman's morality is too simplistic? You think his worldview is too optimistic, too straightforward? You think the kind of heroism he represents is no longer pertinent in our present era? Kelly makes those questions part of the story. uses them to challenge Superman as a character, uses them to drive the conflict, to push Superman into a corner and show us how he reacts. The elite are more than a match for Superman in terms of superpowers, but the real challenge they present to him is through what they stand for. Their brutal methods and their cynical ideology are also their greatest weaknesses, however. Superman defeats the elite because he is clever, because he is courageous, and most of all, because he is adaptable. The elite, like all authoritarians, can never be anything other than what they are. In their arrogance, they don't believe they'll ever need to be anything else. In their ignorance, they don't know how to be anything else. Manchester Black mocks Superman for being unwilling to compromise his morality, his dream of a better world, but it's Black's inability to compromise, to see beyond his flat, monochrome perception that is ultimately his undoing. This is how such people and such ideas operate in the real world as well, and that's the most important part of this story. The elite doesn't just represent the darker, grittier, more violent superheroes of their era of comics, they represent all authoritarians. The bullies, the fascists, the white nationalists, the religious and political zealots, aspiring dictators of every kind. They have no use for democracy. They have no use for law, for due process. They have decided that their way is the right way, that their ends are the only acceptable ends, and they will pursue those ends and impose their will on everyone else, because to them, the fact that they have the power to do it is what gives them the right to do it. Society exists to be ruled, and they have appointed themselves as its rightful rulers. These people exist. As anyone who's been paying attention knows only too well, these people, the political and ideological brethren of the elite, are found not merely in the pages of comic books or on TV or movie screens, but right here in real life. And while we have these people with us, and they will always be with us, Superman will not only be relevant, but necessary. Superman himself doesn't exist outside the realm of fiction, but we still need his example. His ethics, his incorruptibility, his honesty, his sincerity, his compassion, his humanity. As long as there are people and movements that thrive on fear and hatred and ignorance, we will need Superman and people like him to give us a higher standard to which we can aspire, to call us to be our better selves, to show us the kind of people we can and should be. Joe Kelly and his collaborators get it, and it's because they get it that What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way remains as timely today as it was over 20 years ago when it was first published, and is still as relevant to us as it is to its hero. A hero who deserves a mention in any conversation where the subject is the best Superman ever.